Hello, I am Swara Joshi, and today's topic for our class is translation studies. But in that, first we'll be focusing on what is translation, and then we'll be going for different types of translation. So, now as we see or as we know, when we talk about translation, language is the most significant part of translation studies. But do you think that language, when I talk, the words which I use, are the only type of language which we are using? No. The way I the way I nod my face, the way I smile, the way I move my hands, the way I sit, each and everything calls in for what is language. Now, in order to understand what is language, let's go through certain important points. Before knowing translation studies, we should know what exactly language is and what is the significance of language in our culture. So, language is more than just a bunch of words. It is a way of speaking that reflects a particular culture. When I'm talking about culture, culture means Sanskriti. Now, culture plays a very significant role, especially in the Indian demographic. We have diverse and numerous cultures in our country. For instance, there is South Indian culture, there is North Indian culture, there is Western culture, which is very much different from both of these cultures. Then we have Gujarati culture and so many cultures which are really dominant on each other. So when I'm talking about the cultures are being dominant on each other, that doesn't mean I'm specifically just talking about the culture. I'm talking about the language also. And being in India, multilingualism and multiculturalism is at the heart of our country, is at the heart of the people. Language change and evolve as people interact and communicate with each other. In every 10 kilometers, we have a different language, we have a different dialect in India. Language is how people talk and express themselves, it's tied to their culture. Every language has its own accent, every language has its own words, every language has its own starting initial areas. But the most important thing about language is it makes as one term, which is called identity. After that, translation is not like a math or science, it's more of an art that involves understanding languages and cultures. But before that, one more point, if people don't talk and interact, the language can't stay alive and will change over time. Now, communication, conversation are the most significant areas which plays a very significant role in translation studies, because if there is no language, there is no communication, and if there is no communication, there is no need of translation, right? And especially in the era of globalization, translation plays a very, very pivotal role in our country, not just country, but in the entire world. Now, when I said that translation is not like a math or science, well, it's a contradictory thing. You can say, yes, translation study is science at times, and yes, translation studies is an art at times. Why? Because yes, there are certain grammatical rules, grammatical structures, syntactic structures, rules and regulations which we need to take care of when we are translating certain things, certain languages from one language to another. But it's more of an art, because the moment you're planning to translate any one thing, any one language to the another language, it requires more of cultural knowledge, it requires more of contextual knowledge, and most important, it requires the sense and the essence of language to get translated from the source language to the target language. Now, when I'm talking about translation studies, there are three significant factors which we need to take care of in our entire session of translation studies, that is meaning, context, and culture. Meaning, when I'm talking about meaning, translation ensures the original meaning and intent. Intent means purpose of the source text are accurately conveyed. Whatever I'm trying to say, what is being said in the source language, it's completely transferred, it's completely conveyed in the target language. What exactly it meant, it should mean exactly what it was meaning in the source language. It should convey the same thing in the target language as well. For instance, but before that, let's keep one thing in our mind, that when I'm talking about meaning, now meaning is subject to change from situation to situation and condition to condition. For instance, the word whisper in English has different meanings depending on how it is used in a sentence. They whispered in class, for example. For instance, they whispered in class suggests speaking softly without using the vocal cords. Basically, you're not shouting. Basically, you're not using your vocal cords. You are just whispering. It's something which is there in the air. Okay? That is what whisper means, to talk very softly. Second, a stage whisper refers to speaking loudly but in a way that sounds like a whisper for a dramatic effect. So when I'm whispering on stage, that doesn't mean when I'm whispering to someone it shouldn't reach to my audience. Definitely it should reach to my audience, but it should also give an impact that this particular thing was said in a very soft manner. It was whispered to some of the other character but not spoke loudly. Okay. Third, last, the breeze whispered through the trees. That doesn't mean that the breeze literally just said something and just went away. No, it's the gushing sound, it's the soft sound which I'm focusing on when I'm using the term breeze. Okay, as I said, describes the sound of wind moving through leaves. That's what whispering is. That is the gushing, that's the vibration effect which happens when there is wind around the trees. So there are certain meanings of one particular word, and most importantly, in which particular sense you are using that particular word. Another important aspect is context. Context means sandarbh in Hindi. Context plays a very significant role in translation more than the meaning. I should say meaning and context both goes hand in hand. For instance, at times maybe you might have been reading something and suddenly somebody might have asked you, what is the meaning of this particular sentence? What is the meaning of this particular word or a phrase? Maybe at that time you don't know that particular meaning, but you will be asking the question to the another person, may I know the sentence in which that particular word is used? In which particular context they have used that particular word? This word's meaning is this, but again, it matters in which particular context it has been used. So now you understand, context contains more information when we use words in a language. The context around them usually gives us more information than just the word itself. For example, the word run can have various meanings depending on the context. There is a simple word run which means daudna, bhagna. But now this word runs have separate and diverse meanings when used in different particular areas, have different particular meanings in different particular contexts. Okay, for example, the man ran fast implies physical movement. Somebody was running. That's what physical movement is. Second, the bus runs between Madrid and Barcelona. That doesn't mean that bus is running on 4 legs. No. It means it's like a regular schedule which is they are talking about when they say the bus runs between Madrid and Barcelona. Third is the word run can mean different things in different contexts. For example, the well ran dry. The well ran dry. Again, okay? Doesn't it feel complicated why it is being said that? But when you translate it in Hindi, it means जो कुआं है वो सूख चुका है. Okay? But in English, if we'll go for literal translation or simply the translation, it just means that कुआं जो है वो सूख गया है भागते हुए. Something like that, which does not make any sense. So whenever you are translating, you have to focus on the aspects of context. In which particular context that word has been used there. Another last point, he ran for mayor. That doesn't mean there was a fellow who was running for the mayor. No. He ran for the post of mayor. He ran for the position of mayor in the elections. Okay. Now, last out of three, but not definitely the most important one, culture. Okay, all languages and cultures are constantly changing over time. One thing we have to take care of, that languages and culture are never static in nature. They are constantly changing over time. Okay, so cultural knowledge is essentially for translating idiomatic expressions, proverbs, as they often have deep cultural roots and meanings. So, for instance, there is an example which is there which says, "He is the apple of my eye." So, in English, it means this particular person is very near and dear to me. But in Hindi, we have somewhat similar idiom, which means, "Ye meri aankhon ka tara hai," which has the same meaning, but there are different cultural connotations. Okay. Another, "It's raining cats and dogs." It's quite hilarious one. So in English, when we say it's raining heavily, instead of saying it's raining heavily, in another terms we can say it's raining cats and dogs. But अगर हिंदी में हम इसके ट्रांसलेशन के लिए जाएँ तो इसका मतलब ये होता है कि कुत्ते और बिल्लियों की बरसात होना, which is very much hilarious in nature. So there is a reason why we don't go for certain types of translations at times, and why we go for certain translations at times. So in order to understand the different types of translation, we'll be covering in the further slides. Another example for meaning, context and culture, for culture, that is a very dear example to me, that is greetings. Okay, now greetings are the initial expressions that set the tone for interactions and reflect cultural values. Okay, so now there are different types of greetings. There is good morning, there is hello in English, there is namaste in Hindi, there is aap kaise hain, it's also kind of a greeting. Okay, in Rajasthani we tend to say gani khamba. Okay, now there are separate terms and phrases which are used in different languages. Why I am planning to put this out there is because the meaning is same, the culture differs. Okay, now there are so many, and there will be so many situations in which the meaning will be same, in which we have to convey the meaning, and the cultural differences, the cultural nuances will be there. But at the end of the day, that's what translation is: preserving the meaning or the essence, right, and the context, and going ahead with the rest of the text. Now there are different types of translations. So to say, there are numerous types of translation, but today we are just focusing on three types of translation. First is word for word or literal translation. Okay, so literal translation, also known as word for word translation, involves translating text by replacing each word with a synonym in the target language without considering the context or syntax of the original language. Okay, now when I'm saying he is the apple of my eye, अगर हम इसका literal translation करते हैं, which means ये मेरी आँखों का सेब है, which is categorically not correct, which is syntactically not correct, which is grammatically, meaningfully it's not correct, right? So literal translation not always have given their 100% in the process of translation. Okay, for example, spill the beans. Okay, spill the beans, the phrase means to reveal a secret. Okay, whenever we want to ask somebody some kind of a secret, we tend to ask them just spill the beans. But if I go for the word translation or literal translation, it means जितने भी आपके हाथ में beans हैं उनको फैला दो, उनको गिरा दो. That's what spill the beans means in Hindi language. So never go for word to word translation or literal translation in most of the scenarios. However, in the cases of dictionaries, glossaries, in certain areas, word for word translation and literal translation plays a very significant role. Okay, but not always we can say that word for word translations are the most apt type of translations. However, another one, sense for sense translation, is one of the most appropriate, one of the most suitable types of translation in the history of translation studies. So when I'm talking about sense for sense translation, I focus on the essence, I focus on the meaning, I focus on the context of the text of the source language when I'm translating it to the target language. Focuses on conveying the overall meaning or the sense of the source text accurately in the target language rather than a word for word or literal translation. The primary goal of sense for sense translation is to ensure that the meaning, message and the tone of the original text are preserved. The most important aspects of sense for sense translation is whatever the meaning, that is whatever you're trying to convey, it should be preserved, and in which particular manner you are trying to say it should be preserved. Rather, and the most important thing, what exactly you are trying to convey, it should be preserved. And further, the original texts are preserved and effectively communicated in the translated version. Now, it's not important when I'm trying to translate something from source language to target language with the exact words what the respective person has told to me. No, that's not important. The most important thing is what exactly the respective person have told me in the source language. It's the same thing which I can convey in the target language also. Not necessary with the exact words, but the essence, the meaning, the context has to be taken care of in the sense for sense translation. For example, the English expression piece of cake may be translated to बहुत आसान in हिंदी. Okay? पीस ऑफ केक का अगर हम लिटरल ट्रांसलेशन देखें तो मतलब केक का एक टुकड़ा, बट अगर हम सेंस फॉर सेंस ट्रांसलेशन के लिए जाएंगे देन वी विल अंडरस्टैंड कि इट्स अ वेरी इजी थिंग फॉर मी, दैट्स व्हाट पीस ऑफ केक मीन्स, राइट. Sense for sense translation allows for some flexibility. Yes, indeed. It does not focus on the rules and regulations completely, but it focuses more on the essence and the sense effect. And because of that, yes, it's very more flexible in itself as compared to word for word translation. It can be sentence structure, it can be vocabulary, stylistic elements. For example, आज मुझे अच्छा नहीं लग रहा है, आज मुझे काफ़ी थकान हो रही है. I mean, I don't have to say the same exact words if I'm translating from Hindi to English. I can simply say I am feeling blue today in English, okay, or I am feeling lethargic today in English, okay. That's what sense for sense translation is, conserving and preserving the meaning, the sense, and the most important thing is the context. Last but not the least, transliteration. Now, whatever you guys write on our WhatsApp today, the way of language which we use, that is English, that is a best example of transliteration. Transferring alphabets or words from one language into corresponding similar sounding characters of the another language. For example, in Hindi, if you say, for example, if you say, in Hindi, we write namaste like this, but in English, I may write namaste like this, right? That's what transliteration is. Basically, it helps people pronounce words or names in a foreign language correctly. So, whatever language which we are using today on our social media handles or a regular WhatsApp chat, when I'm talking about whatever I'm speaking right now also, the same thing if I'm writing in the Hindi language, it can be a best example of transliteration. So thank you for today's session.